You've probably heard a million times about IQ and EQ being essential for great leaders. But what if I told you there's a third intelligence, one that's becoming absolutely critical for survival in today's world? In this explainer, we're going to dive into something called spiritual intelligence, or SQ, and why it just might be the missing link for modern leadership.
Okay, let's get right into it. The reality is, even leaders who are incredibly smart and emotionally tuned in are struggling. They're failing. It's like the old playbook just doesn't work anymore, and you can feel the strain across entire organizations.
And that really brings us to the core question, right? If our leaders are smarter and more self-aware than ever before, why are we seeing so many great organizations just sinking? Well, the answer seems to lie in a few key pressures that are defining work as we know it today.
First off, there's the sheer relentless pace of change. We're talking about nonstop disruption, technologically, economically, socially. It creates this fog of uncertainty where the right path forward is almost never clear, and it's so easy for fear-based reactive decisions to take over.
Next up, and we see this in the headlines all the time, are these massive ethical crises. Leaders are under immense pressure to deliver, and sometimes that pressure leads to cutting corners. It leads to choices that serve fear or greed. And those decisions, they can shatter public trust and literally destroy a company's reputation overnight.
And finally, there's the human cost of all this. When people feel like their work is just a series of tasks, disconnected from any real, larger purpose, they check out, they disengage. We're seeing burnout on a massive scale. Because at the end of the day, short-term perks just aren't enough to keep people truly motivated and fulfilled. So you've got this perfect storm. Constant disruption, ethical minefields, and widespread burnout. It all points to a massive gap that IQ and EQ, as important as they are, just can't fill on their own. And this is where that third intelligence, SQ, comes into the picture. It offers a much deeper dimension of leadership.
So what in the world is SQ? Let's be crystal clear here. This has nothing to do with religion. This is a totally secular, business-focused idea. Think of it as the ability to tap into your deepest sense of purpose and your core values to guide what you do. It's the thing that gives a leader clarity when everything's chaotic, resilience when you get knocked down, and the wisdom to make those really tough calls.
And let's just tackle the biggest misconception head-on right now, because it's important. When we say spirituality in this context, we are not talking about organized religion. Not at all. We're talking about universal human values that anyone, anywhere, can connect with. Things like having a sense of purpose, feeling compassion for others, and living with integrity.
So you might be thinking, okay, if SQ is this powerful, why isn't it part of every single leadership program on the planet? Well, it turns out there are some very real, very stubborn hurdles, both in how we think about it and how we actually try to put it into practice. Let's break those down.
Just on a conceptual level, a lot of organizations really struggle with this. Besides that confusion with religion we just talked about, the business case can feel a little fuzzy. How do you measure the ROI on purpose? In cultures that are all about logic and short-term wins, this can be a really tough sell, especially if the senior leaders aren't walking the talk themselves.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. This perception of SQ as being fluffy or new age creates this huge blind spot. It stops organizations from looking at the deeper human needs and motivations that, ironically, are the real drivers of performance and long-term success. And then you've got the practical, on-the-ground challenges, like how do you even measure it? It's not like an IQ test. Plus, leaders are unbelievably busy. Who has the time for deep, reflective work? A lot of them are also pretty skeptical of coaching, and those generic one-size-fits-all training programs, they almost always fail because they just feel totally disconnected from the real job.
Okay, so we've laid out the problems. The big question is, how do you get past all those obstacles and actually make SQA a real tangible asset for your organization? The good news is, it's not about just hoping for the best. It's about having a clear, actionable game plan.
So here's a really practical 5-step path. First, you've got to reframe the language. Stop saying spirituality and start talking about concrete things like resilience, ethics, and purpose. Second, you absolutely need buy-in from the very top. You need champions who lead by example. Third, back it all up with data. Show the real-world evidence connecting these ideas to better engagement and business outcomes. Fourth, ditch the boring lectures. Use tailored, hands-on simulations that feel real. And maybe most importantly, number 5, don't make this a separate side project. Weave these principles directly into the systems you already have, like performance management.
All right, so what does this actually look like when the rubber hits the road? When leaders really develop their SQ, they are equipped to handle those high-stakes, high-pressure challenges in a completely different and, frankly, more effective way. Let's look at a few examples of SQ in action. So picture an ethical dilemma. A leader low on SQ might just see it as a simple choice between profits and doing the right thing, and they'll probably go for the short-term win. But a leader with high SQ, they tap into their inner compass. They understand that making the ethically sound choice, even when it's unpopular or harder, is what builds the single most valuable asset a company can have: long-term trust. Or think about a toxic work environment, one filled with blame and negativity. It's so easy to get dragged down into that muck. A high SQ leader, though, models compassion and accountability. They don't just punish bad behavior, they actually dig deeper. They help reframe conflict and get to the core human issues, transforming all that negative energy into a catalyst for positive change.
And this brings us right back to where we started, navigating massive disruption. When a crisis hits, a market crash, a pandemic, whatever, a high SQ leader acts like an anchor in the storm. They stay grounded in their core values and constantly remind their team of the company's why, its purpose. They frame the crisis not just as something to survive, but as a genuine opportunity for growth, and that inspires incredible resilience.
So, when you boil it all down, this really comes back to a fundamental choice. A choice about the kind of leader you are and the kind of leader you want to become. It's all about that internal compass you use to find your way every single day. So, the question I want to leave you with is this: is your leadership built just for performance, or is it guided by a deeper purpose? Because in the world we live in today, it might just be that purpose is the only thing that can guarantee sustainable performance in the long run.